TikTok. It's time to rock. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, folks, to a special episode here of the British Electric Blues Show. I have with me here on the top level, the Rock Professor. We have Brad here with us as well, and we've got a host of special guests who are going to be here any second now to join us and talk about Fleetwood Mac and a whole lot of other things, Brad.
Yeah, I can't wait. Can't wait. Been looking forward to this. Woke up nice and early for this one, so looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun show, Andrew.
Awesome. Rock Professor, how are you?
Yes, I'd just like to complain officially on live on YouTube about the fact Mr. Walton sent me a message last night saying, are you ready to go live in 2 hours? and then I was somewhat surprised for a little while.
Awesome.
You missed out the crucial 4. You missed.
Fantastic. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've got, like I said, we've got a special panel of people here to join us and talk about an upcoming book and a subject that's very, very dear to our heart. If you have any questions for any of the special guests we have on, please put them into the chat. We won't be doing a shout out at the start of the show. We'll do one at the end because we've got some people here that we need to get in there quickly. So if you just give me a second while I organise that, people, and we'll get that going. Hold on, Brad. Where are we? Here we go.
Welcome, gents. Welcome, everyone.
Hello. Welcome indeed.
Hi.
That was awesome. Thank you, Andrew.
We have a studio audience.
I don't think the applause was big enough, Andrew.
So we have quite a few people here. I'm Bob Schaffner with my co-author Jeff Lowenthal of the Fleetwood Mac book in Chicago. First time I'm meeting Brad. Nice to meet you. Working musician. Michael Freeman, Grammy Awarding blues producer and instrumental in helping us get this all together. Curtis Meisner, longtime friend, used to work for the guy on the bottom right there, Paul Hamer. He's been a friend of mine since my teenage years.
Mine too.
We won't go into anything else, Paul. So, and I appreciate everybody joining us. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about in the beginning is how this all happened. And that's all because of Paul Hamer. Right. So, Paul, if you can describe how you met Jeff and how we met each other at the Jeremy Spencer concert.
Yeah. Well, many years ago, I don't know how long ago it was, Jeff, I was walking through the Oak Park Library one day, and there was a photo exhibition on, and I walked into the exhibition, and I saw lots of great photographs, but I saw one that intrigued me because I thought I'd seen it somewhere before, and I'm looking at it, I can't place it. And Jeff happened to be there. It was the opening day of the exhibition. He was answering questions. So I walked up to him and I said, hey, where'd you take that picture? And he said, well, that was at Chess Studios. And then suddenly a bell went off in my head and I said, wait, that wasn't the Fleetwood Mac session, was it? And he said, yeah, the house photographer at Chess, along with being a Newsweek photographer. And I shot that session, and I just couldn't believe it. After all these years, I'm meeting the guy that's responsible for taking the great photographs of our heroes, and that was just really special for me. So we became friends, and we did all sorts of little things together. First thing I thought of was that people might be interested in limited edition copies of Jeff's beautiful photographs. So that was the first thing we did. We We printed some photographs, and then as different artists would come into town, we'd go visit them and show them the photographs. And one time we were at Fitzgerald's backstage with Jeremy Spencer, and we meet Bob Schaffner at the same show.
Wow.
So it was old home week, and that was Bob's first introduction to Jeff. And then over the years, this kind of all coalesced into the idea of a book.
And I'm humbled to be part of it.
Oh, he's told that story perfectly. That's just the way it happened. I like to think of my whole life and career and everything as an analogy of balls on a pool table before they're broken, and you break them and then they go in all directions unless you're an absolutely super trick pool player. So the possibility or the likelihood of various people would be analogous to the balls to meeting ever. And then like for me to meet Paul, and he would mention to me about that recording session. I could have gone to the library an hour earlier and left before he arrived. So I never wouldn't have known about the popularity of this recording session. And he told me there are many people who are still very, very interested in it, and the participants. And he introduced me to Robert. And I'm not sure when Robert began pestering me about the book, but I think he was
the adjective, Jeff.
Was that every day, or was that?
Got to be every day.
Yeah, a couple times a day.
Yeah. So, and I generally said in a very kindly way, no. And he'd keep asking, and I figured this would get him off my back. I said, look, if you get me a publisher, I'll do it. And unfortunately, at that time, he got me a publisher. So I had to put up or shut up. So he arranged to contact all the artists and producers and musicians who were quoted in the book, and there are quite a few of them. And we were on a phone call with the publisher before we had a contract, and we talked for about 40 minutes, and it turned out that I think a vice president of the company that we were speaking with was a big Fleetwood Mac fan, and Peter Green especially. And he said, I'll tell you what, we're going to send you a contract. And he was going to assign us an editor. And then he said, I think I'll do it because I'm interested in the music. I'll edit your book. And that was a great coup for us, because he was absolutely terrific, as all of the people at the company we've been in contact with have been. So it's been a year of labor.
A little more than that, but
it's what?
It's about a year and a half. Yeah.
Well, you know, when you get older, time flies, you know. So
it's only been 2 weeks.
One of the things I want to make sure, because I know Paul's time is limited, and Paul obviously made some stellar guitars in his lifetime, and with Curtis. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, Paul, you wanted your guitars to sound like Peter and Danny.
Oh yeah, very much so. Particularly one model that we called the Sunburst. The idea was to get that Fleetwood Mac sound, and so we strived to do that. I don't know if we achieved it, but we came as close as we could, and yeah, that was all part of the plan.
And Paul actually did a clinic once, and I don't know where it was in England, that you, why don't you describe that to everybody?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody remembers Rod Argent Music in London, but it was run by a guy by the name of Howard Brain, and he was a real character. He's a super nice guy. And he invited me to do a guitar clinic in the store, and it was going to be on a Saturday when the most amount of kids would be in the store. So I was there, and I was playing guitar and showing the kids the different sounds. And while I was playing, one kid left, and Howard came up to me after this guy left and said, "Hey, Paul, you know who that was? That was Danny Kerwin." I said, Danny Kerwin, you got to go outside and get him and bring him back in. Come on. And so he ran out on the street, grabbed Danny and brought him back in. And Danny at that time was very difficult to talk with. I asked him to, put the guitar on and play, but he wasn't interested in that. He answered most questions about how he's doing with the same answer all the time. He said, "I'm fit. I'm keeping fit. I'm keeping fit," and that was kind of pretty much his response to every question. And it was really a very emotional time for me meeting him because when you meet someone who you've adored and listened to for years, and they are having a very, very difficult time in life, it's for me it was very emotional, and I'll never forget it. And he left after a few minutes and really wouldn't talk about Fleetwood Mac or the guitar or playing or.
That's kind of how Peter Green was when I met him in the 90s too. It was actually very sad.
Yeah.
One thing before you go, Paul, that you and Curtis had the fortunate to play Greenie when Gary Moore had it.
Yeah.
So if you guys could talk about that together, because that's something that I know Brad would be exceedingly interested in.
Okay. Hey, Curtis, why don't you start?
Well, I want to say first, I knew, in case people don't know, I knew Paul since I was in high school. I think I was 16 or 17, and my stepbrother came home one day and said, "There's a really cool guitar shop, half a mile away. You gotta go check this out. There's some guy in there with real long hair, and they've got all these old amps and guitars. It's really crazy." And we got on our bikes and rode down there, and went in. And here's Paul. He's got this long ponytail, and he was stringing up a lap steel, which I had never seen, and playing it through an old Fender amp. And I was just amazed right away. This shop is crazy. 3 pickup customs and sunbursts and flying V's. I knew about all these guitars, but never saw them in person. And here's this guy, and he's playing. And the first thing I remember when you picked up a guitar and you were playing, and we're talking about Danny Kerwin, your vibrato is exactly like Danny Kerwin. And I always wondered if you kind of tried to sound like that, because when I got into Fleetwood Mac, it's like, wait a minute, Paul, you should hear this guy's vibrato. You're like the same thing. No, seriously, people probably don't know that. Paul was
thanks for bringing that up, Curtis, because I wanted to have a Danny Kerwin vibrato from the first day that I heard him. Unfortunately, I was trying to get that vibrato on a 1959 Les Paul 3 pickup custom.
Right, there you go.
Which is called a fretless wonder.
Yeah.
And what it means is the frets on the guitar have been sanded to almost nothing. They're perfectly flat. And that was meant for jazz guys to shred on, So there was, they could move their fingers across the frets really fast. Unfortunately, for somebody trying to do a vibrato, it was the worst guitar that you could possibly pick up and try to do it. So.
To me, it was so frustrating because you had this great technique, and I was trying to bend the strings and do that and play vibrato. And I would say, "How do you do that?" And you would say, "Just give it a yank. Just put your finger, just give it a yank." Exactly what you told me. So anyway, to make a long story short, then I immediately said, Paul had this sign, they have lessons. I said, "I got to sign up for your lessons right away." So he was like my first guitar teacher. Before that, I was just kind of learning on my own. And I bugged Paul for probably a year before he would sell me a 3 pickup custom. You had those things in a case, and it said "not for sale," and that drove me crazy. What do you mean?
That was my first retail mistake, Curtis. Is
right.
Stuff in the store not for sale.
So my stepbrother and I bugged you for like 6 months until we bought both of those guitars.
Well, yeah, you did. You guys were right there at the forefront of everything with vintage guitars.
So I bought that, and it was funny because I bought that very lap steel that it was, I think, a 1950s Rickenbacker that Paul had been stringing up and playing. I bought that and an old Fender Deluxe from you, and it kind of went from there. So
Curtis, circle back to when
Yeah.
Gary Moore brought Greenie in, and you and Paul had the opportunity.
it was kind of like a number of people kind of hanging around and trying to play. And at one point, I got to pick it up, not through an amp, and play it to feel it. But even if you play it, I had a Les Paul at the time. I had a Sunburst, and you can play a guitar even when it's acoustic, when it's not plugged in, and you can tell it has a sound. Every guitar has a certain timbre, and you can tell, and you can get the feel, and you can bend a string. The only thing that was weird about it is Gary Moore had such heavy strings on there.
Yeah.
He liked really heavy strings. So it was harder for me, but it didn't matter. It was more like, well, I'm actually holding this thing. I wanted to plug it in, but there were people there, and we were, it really wouldn't have worked for me to do that.
Yeah.
But I got to just playing it and holding it and looking at it and saying, here's the reverse pickup and all that sort of thing. And I knew right away, well, this is it, So that was really emotional to me.
I'm sure it was for you too, Paul, right?
Yeah. Well, Gary was a great player. He's a super nice guy. And
by the way, here's an album he signed for me there. I brought albums. He was coming in that. There it is, to Curtis, thank Gary Moore. So
nice, Curtis.
Nice.
I was always quick to bring an album in if I knew that someone was coming in. I wanted to.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Gary was he's a really good player, and he had been discovered by Peter, I think.
From Skid Row.
When
he was in Skid Row.
They warmed up for Fleetwood Mac, and Gary used very heavy strings, and he was kind of a two-fingered player when you watched him play. He would
right.
I don't know where I am on. Where's there? He just uses the first two fingers of his hand for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I found that really, really strange. It was almost like Django. Django.
Exactly like Django. You're right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And how can you do that? How can you play as complicated as Gary Moore played, and with primarily two fingers? Sometimes he'd use a third finger, but not very often. And I often thought that because of the heavy strings, he had to use two fingers to bend them, And he got a great sound, and it's too bad he's gone as well.
Yeah.
So Paul, no plectrum. That's you've just played with his fingers.
Oh no, he played with a pick, but I'm talking about with his left hand. Sorry, everything's backwards.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Yes.
He's in England, Paul. It's backwards. He's in England.
He only played with two fingers. Yeah, he played with a pick or a plectrum, and
he had a really heavy attack too.
But
really strong.
Guys like Danny Kerwin, Peter Green, Gary Moore, those guys, when you're great, you can play any guitar.
Right.
And you can make it sound like you. And so no matter what guitars those guys picked up, whether it was, like a Les Paul with P90s or a Stratocaster or what did Danny use very early on? He used like
Watkins.
Yeah.
A rapier.
But you hear him play, and it's it's unmistakably, oh, that's Danny,
Yeah, and he also, to your point, Curtis, you were talking about, one of the things that Danny did that Green talked about is he could play with his vibrato, and you think he was using a slide.
Yeah, it was so perfect. It was perfectly clear.
Yeah.
His girlfriend at the time had reached out to me and said, and I don't know what this means, and I might have said it on a previous show, but she said, as I think we all know, Danny had perfect pitch, but she said his demeanor was like a cold drip of water on a hot rock.
Wow.
So, Jeff, when it comes to pictures, one of the things that we haven't talked about is the equipment you use during the session.
Okay, because I know Paul may not be here very much longer.
Yeah.
I just want to say that, and I want to be very clear about this, that this book would never have happened if Paul hadn't talked to me about Chess Studios and Fleetwood Mac. So thank you, Paul.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Paul.
It's been an honor to work with you, Jeff, and you are the nicest, most humble chronicler of the 1960s. And I think you have a couple more books in you, by the way. There's other topics that you've got.
Thank you, Paul.
And are waiting to see the light of day from the museum.
Okay. Sure.
The Lowenthal Museum.
Yes.
That's right.
The legendary Lowenthal.
Oh, thank you for that.
Well, it's been
Bob,
an honour, Paul, to have you join us and just explain to us, albeit briefly, some of your experiences and thoughts with Peter Green and Fleetwood Mac and Danny Kerwin, because as you have already probably understood, it's a big part of what we do here on the channel, Paul, and to have you being recognised as one of the main catalysts in getting this book that we're so eagerly waiting to get our hands on. Thank you too, Paul, because we all know that it takes different different links, doesn't it, Simon, to get people together to do something. We all know that, and it's always good to acknowledge those people that are going to do that for us, because I'm sure this book is going to be a document. It's going to be a legacy, you know, that fans in the future and indeed music critics and journalists are going to always go back to. So well done, guys.
And Paul has actually seen the book. He's one of the few.
Hey, I want to say something about Brad and Simon and Andrew. You guys are doing something very important, I think, because this part of musical history is, kind of long ignored, and I think it's something that needs to be told. These stories need to be told, and these people need to be appreciated. And I want to thank you guys for doing just that.
Thank you, Paul.
Absolutely.
It means a lot to us.
Paul. That's really kind. Yeah, we kind of hope that yes, people can come back and watch these later on and get some kind of oral history. About
One other
a lot
quick
of different
thing
things.
before I go is I don't know if anybody's addressed this, but as a young kid looking at this double volume Fleetwood Mac and Chicago record, I was struck by the fact that it may have been the first time that anybody thought to put British blues musicians together with black American blues musicians, and how brave that was in 1969.
Wow.
Yeah, and we gathered from Mike Vernon when I interviewed him, and subsequently when Bob and Jeff spoke to him last week. That idea had been bubbling around for Fleetwood Mac for quite some time, and Peter and probably Mick Fleetwood were very interested in trying to find a way to do that.
It's an important aspect of the story, and that needs to be
It
told.
really is.
Okay, guys. Thanks.
Hey,
very
Paul,
much.
thanks a lot.
Bye, Paul. Thank you.
Take care, Paul.
Good to
Thank
see
you so much.
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
One of the things that Mike Vernon said too is that he, because of the time of year, he wanted to get other people that really couldn't get. So he was a little disappointed in that. But he, one of the things that
My sound is off again.
One of the things that Curtis saw the book and opened it up, and I can show you what he saw.
Curtis, you're fine.
You're fine, Curtis.
Curtis, it's all
Curtis, we can hear you.
You've just moved and turned it off.
So Curtis looked at the book and saw this, and he thought, the pictures are the same size.
Just hold that up again, Bob. I was a little bit slow. Hold on. Hold
I'm
that
sorry.
up. It's okay.
So that's the inside jacket.
I can see how he would have been fooled.
Yeah.
I was thinking today, and I told Robert earlier, that as a little premium, we might distribute a small magnifying glass with the book, and then people could.
And by the way,
I've had two people tell me, both guitarists, who said they used a magnifying glass to look at the 1 by 1.5 inch reproductions on the original 2-volume set to see what guitars were being played and the instruments, the amps and everything.
That's
So
what you had to do because they were so small.
Yeah, so they were probably, they'll be very happy to see them somewhat larger now.
Yeah,
Absolutely. What kind of cameras did you use, Jeff? Did you use just one camera or did you use multiple?
For this session and most sessions I used Leica M2S's, which were a professional version that had a lever on the bottom to advance the film. I mean, the Leica lenses are renowned for their sharpness and so forth, but the reason I used the cameras was the other thing they were known for is almost silent operation, because the one thing you don't want to do in a recording session is have a click show up on the take and have the engineers be mad at you or so forth. So you want to be as unobtrusive as possible. So I used 2 Leicas and about 4 or 5 lenses, and that was my kit.
And that's one thing that you'll notice in the book and almost all the pictures. Nobody's looking at Jeff. Nobody's looking.
I guess I wasn't a very impressive photographer. That's why.
I don't know. When they see your picture of you at the time with those pants on, I think they're gonna like that a lot.
Yeah, I see your picture as a drummer in the jacket of the book, so I'll direct people to that if you.
I have to say that I sent the publisher 4 pictures because I didn't have any pictures because I was a little young in the '60s. So, and they took the oldest picture, and it's me with hair like Brad Cook's got and a beard, and as somebody said, "Can you say Jesus?"
Yeah, you had it all covered.
Matter of fact, there you go.
Well, we can't see it. Move it to the right.
Whoop.
Yeah.
Bit more, but no, other way. That's it. There he is.
You look like a kid.
That drum set is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because Dennis Wilson, I had sold it, and actually Paul helped sell it, and Dennis Wilson ended up with it. When I was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with my missus, I said, "That's my drum set." And of course, she swore at me a couple of times, and there's a crack in that tom. That's my drum set. It was a 1964 pink champagne Gretsch set.
Wow.
Which I bought used.
Pink champagne.
So, and Michael Freeman did our interviews. He conducted an interview with Marshall Chest. We're going to be showing at the event, as well as Mike Vernon. And of course, we had Michael do it because he's British and gives us instant credibility, right, Simon?
Exactly. Unless it's a fake accent.
But it was yeah. Yeah, I'm from London, Ohio, really.
There we go. I knew it.
But, those interviews were great fun.
And when you hear the Chess interview, I think you'll be amazed. It's very freewheeling, and it's very funny too, because he's a guy who says exactly what he thinks. And I was really amused and amazed to see how he started in the business at, I think, 16.
Right.
And he had a lot of funny things happen, which he'll tell you about.
Yeah.
He's quite animated. And by the way, so anybody, obviously, people overseas can't come to our event on the 21st or 22nd of October at Chess Studios, but those videos that we're talking about, those interviews, we have kindly permission from Mike Vernon as well as Marshall Chess to post those at a later date. So everybody will be able to see those.
Fantastic.
Yeah, they were great fun to do. And Marshall and I got along very well. And Mike Vernon, of course, I know very well as a friend. And I've worked on several records with him. So it's always fun to catch up with him. And he's got lots of stories too.
Yeah, it's actually, I just, my wife edited the video and I just got an email from Mike Vernon because he was going on vacation and he thought it was a great job. So in the videos, you'll see a lot of the pictures of that Jeff took. The other thing that I want to depart to your audience, Andrew, is you had mentioned that you're going to give away a book. And it's very hard for us to send you, as you know, we sent you and Simon Peter Green pictures, but to send a book to New Zealand would be very difficult. So what Jeff and I plan to
Very
do for you,
nice. Looks good.
Jeff and I plan to do for you and your viewing audience is the picture that you have of Willie Dixon and Peter Green. We're going to sign 3 or 4 of those pictures, 5x7s, and mail them to you so you can give those out as you see fit.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That
That's
one
the
there.
one.
That picture right
That's the
there,
one.
right? Yep.
Well, like my co-hosts have just already said, you know, we appreciate that. We'll have those as prizes, definitely, but the channel is definitely going to have a competition where we're going to give away your book anyway. So the good thing about Amazon doing stuff like this, guys, is that you can do a competition. Whoever wins it can send us the address, we pay for it, and Amazon ships it. So that's always, you know, that's a good thing. But certainly, as you and I spoke before, Bob,
Right.
getting a book shipped is quite expensive compared to an envelope. You know, an envelope,
Right.
yeah, you know, can go by mail, and it's a fraction of the price. But look, thank you very much. That's just a wonderful gesture on behalf of you guys for the channel, and you know, we look.
I just don't like the
to,
fact that I have to pay Jeff for those pictures. That's, you know.
The retirement fund isn't
You
going
notice,
well,
you
Jeff,
notice
is
how calm I'm staying?
Yes.
So one of the things that I want to talk about with Brad and Curtis in particular is something you talked about on one of your last shows, and the feelings, and probably Michael Freeman as well, is the reissue or the issue of the Greenie guitar by Gibson.
Oh yeah.
So Curtis, you had an analogy about that when Marshall did a combo thing.
Well, yeah. I don't know if you can see my blues breaker amp down here. If the thing is even.
Yep.
Am I right behind her? Anyway, yeah, because this is one of 50 in the world.
You're gonna piss off Brad in a second here.
Yes.
And me.
Made exactly like Clapton's. Everything about it, from the chassis to the aluminum chassis, to the size of the box, the grill cloth, the transformers, everything. They went to the original manufacturers and they got the original blueprints and made everything exactly the way it was. Anyway, so they made 50 of these, and then the idea was they would then make Gibson would make 50 Les Pauls, and it was supposed to be a Sunburst Les Paul, but Gibson messed up and made a gold top Les Paul. But anyway, so you had to buy. It's kind of like the reissue of the Greenie, where you had to buy. You would get the amp, and then you would get the guitar with it, and I think it was $35,000, something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was, and I think we got 15 of them in the States here. And then when I was working, handling all the Marshall distribution, you know, I kind of saved one, put it in quarantine, and then ended up buying it. I was holding a few in case some other rock stars wanted them, because they all went to industry people, and no normal person got one of these things. So anyway, but
so Curtis is basically calling himself abnormal.
I'm abnormal. Well, that was one of the perks of my job, that I could go, well, I think I'm just going to hide one in a quarantine location. No one will know where it is. And then 6 months later, everyone will forget and I'll just buy it. But anyway, so I think that's kind of the same thing with this Greenie thing, where I have a feeling they worked it out where Gibson gets half the money, and then probably Kirk gets half of the thing, because there's no way it should be $50,000. I know that. The guitar should be maybe 20 grand, something like
Brad,
that.
did you notice in the Murphy guitar that Kurt Hammett carved his initials into the back?
Yeah,
I did.
I think maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think, Brad, do you think he carved that in the actual Greenie one or on one of the Murphy reissues. I think that's what he's doing.
I'm thinking it's just in the Murphy reissues. I'm hoping that with the legacy that is the Greenie guitar, that you wouldn't go and initial it because you own it. That's
sacrilegious.
Oh, that would be horrible. That'd be horrifying.
Yeah, but look, like we've said on the channel before, we're glad that Greenie's getting used, and Kirk's actually using the guitar, so
right,
that's a good thing. And as someone who, like a collector that would have bought it and hung it on a wall, would never see it again, which is something that that guitar's got so much legacy behind it. It's good to see that it's still being used, right. But I would be a little bit probably disappointed if Kurt did put his initials on the original Greenie. I would think that that's got a legacy on its own. He's an owner now. He doesn't need to put his initials on it. Everyone knows that he's an owner of it. But let's just hope he hasn't done that. That's no disrespect to Kurt either. Because
I don't think he has, Brad.
Okay.
I don't think he has. I've done some research when I saw that too. I've gone on a couple of Les Paul forums and asked the questions, and it's, these are guys, insiders in the States on the Les Paul forum. It's one of the oldest Les Paul forums that's been around for a while, and the general consensus is that that's what you're paying the extra $25,000 for, Curtis, is Kurt Hammett's signature carved into the back of the replica. That's where the other 25 grand's going.
Right, okay. That's his share, is it?
Well, yeah. Exactly, because I know what that guitar should be worth in there. I know they're doing all those extras with it, and they fly you out there, and they do this and that, and you get to meet them, and and all that sort of stuff. But there's no way to do that.
Clearly from a marketing point of view for Gibson, and let's some of us play devil's advocate here. It's a coup for the company, guys. When you think about it, Curtis, all those guitars, as we know, were sold. And they were never sold through dealers. So, like you with your Marshall amp, they were all insiders,
right?
All insiders and/or wealthy people. So, while we're just talking about that, can I just ask you guys a question? So, because I can't confirm this, I've ordered a couple of books that hopefully might tell me this. But all the 58, 59 Sunbursts that came out, and there's a very few of them. From what I understand, over half of them are locked in vaults in Japan. Is that correct, or is that just a rumor?
Well, I haven't heard that, but I have a feeling. I mean, there could be some over there. Could be, because when I worked with Paul at Northern Prairie Music back in the 70s, and we used to put out our inventory lists, and we would start to get a lot of inquiries from Japanese people, shops, stores, and they almost wanted to buy everything we had.
Wow.
And Sunburst, they would buy them, and they would almost any price. And these weren't players. So it really exploded over there. The Japanese loved all the vintage market. And
well, maybe it's kind of like Brad said, they just hung it on the wall.
And so it could be that a lot of them, ended up that way. So
well, since we're talking about guitars, one thing that I wanted to make sure to cover is Michael Freeman's the only one among us that actually saw Peter Green play live in 68, 67?
No, it would have been 68 or 69.
Do you recall, did he play the Gibson the whole time? The Les Paul?
The two gigs that I really remember, he was playing a Les Paul the whole time.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what Mike Vernon said. I asked him because he played a Strat, and as Curtis and Brad were talking about, as Mike Vernon said, Peter Green could play anything. He would sound like Peter Green.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was the touch. It's not necessarily the guitar.
Both he and Danny were playing Les Pauls.
Yeah. So at that time, that was probably the guitar that Peter gave Danny.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. So can you describe? I mean, you went backstage and.
Peter was very generous with fans who would try to collar him after the gig and have a chat, much to the chagrin of the other members of the band who wanted to go to the pub and have a pint. But You know, the one time I really had a long conversation with him, and actually there were about 3 or 4 of us there just asking questions. We must have stood outside in the alley next to the venue at least an hour, possibly an hour and a half, just talking to him about his influences, his music, you know, all the things that you do when you're interested in a guitar player. He was so personable, and he even asked if we had any more questions before he had to go.
Wow.
Gentlemen.
And the other gig I really remember that gig was, I think, at St. Mary's College, Twickenham. And the other gig that I saw them at and remember well was in Windsor. There was a club in Windsor that put on blues shows regularly, and they played there. And the place was packed. Fleetwood Mac gigs were very well attended. And both shows were excellent. They just really played incredibly well. And,
I think that's what people don't realize. In 1969, Fleetwood Mac sold more records that year than the Rolling Stones and the Beatles combined.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah.
I mean, there was such a huge shift going on in the market where youngsters of my age were attaching to all the British blues boom bands, and Mike Vernon certainly propelled many of them. You know, from Savoy Brown to 10 years after, Ainsley Dunbar's Retaliation, and of course Fleetwood Mac and Chicken Shack. And those were staples of our weekend gigs to go and see all those bands. So Fleetwood Mac's, you know, radio in England was the great conduit to be able to listen to all of this. And there were some fairly progressive DJs that were starting to emerge that would put these tracks on BBC and eventually the pirate radio stations. And you know, we lapped it up. We had 4 or 5 or 6 weekly music newspapers that we would grab: Melody Maker, Sounds, New Musical Express, Record Mirror. So we combed those every Thursday when they came out for the latest gigs and who was doing what. And it was a wonderful time to just get immersed in music of your day. And everybody just rushed for all of it. And Fleetwood Mac was certainly at the top of the heap for the blues bands. And of course,
and those blues bands, Michael, I mean, Savoy Brown, Kim Simmons, Fleetwood Mac, they all admired Willie Dixon, Otis Spann.
But you see, they all did their research. There was a BBC disc jockey named Mike Raven. He was actually on the pirate radio stations before he went onto the BBC. But Mike would pay sailors going out of either Southampton or Liverpool to bring back blues and soul records that you couldn't find in the UK. So his shows were an absolute must to listen to. But when you talk to somebody like Peter, you knew that he'd done his homework, and you hear the records that he was listening to. He was very enamored with King Curtis, the sax player. And I remember in an interview he was saying that his phrasing was certainly influenced by King Curtis, who was an extraordinary player. So these guys did their homework. They weren't just getting out there just because they wanted to impress girls. They were out there and they were serious music guys. And they
You hear that, Brad?
Yes, I'm listening. I'm listening to you guys. I'm a student. I'm just listening.
and you know, for me,
we know how it is in Australia.
What have you heard that I don't know about?
Do you know
Tina.
Darren Jack?
Brad?
Do you know?
Sorry.
Do you know Darren Jack?
I've heard of the name. Yes.
Yeah, he's. I think he's in Sydney. He came over to do some work with me and got him playing in some of the Roses in Chicago.
Yep.
That's one thing that Mike Vernon and Mike and I talked about, is that one of the things that Peter Green wanted to do, and Dinky Dawson talked about in his book, is he wanted to go to the Southside Blues Club to play. and the band's like, maybe you shouldn't do that. So Willie took him over to a club with Otis Spann, and they were really worried about him. But as Michael says, Willie vouched for him, and as soon as he played, they're like, as Mike Vernon said, and I'll quote him, they were godsmacked. One thing that Mike Vernon said, as well as Bruce Thomas, is that they think Peter Green was a shaman. I mean, one thing that Mike said that he hated is that you go to see a band, and Brad and Simon and Andrew, you probably this way too. You see him on Monday, and then you go see him Saturday, and they play the exact same thing.
Yep.
And that's one thing that Ainsley Dunbar said about Peter Green, even though Ainsley Dunbar only played with Mayo for, I think, 6 to 9 months. Said they do the same songs, but Peter Green would never play the same solo.
Well, he improvised.
Yeah, to your point about him being a shaman, there was a certain presence when you were around him. It was very calm, and he seemed very grounded.
He also had a wicked sense of humor, according to Mike Vernon. Very dry and sarcastic.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, I have a question. When you saw Peter Green, how old were you when you were living over there?
I'm not going to divert.
No. I meant, because what I'm wondering is, were you able to see Peter with John Mayall with the Blues Breakers when he was?
No, I never saw. I never saw that band.
Okay.
No, I was born in 1952, so I would have been 16, 17, something like that.
Okay.
That's kind of the age that you and I were, Kurt, when we met Paul Heyman.
Yeah, I think I was 16, 17.
Yeah, I think I was 16 or 17. So it was just a few years ago.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're doing on the event, by the way, and it's the 21st and 22nd. 22nd is open to the public. 21st is VIP only.
Okay.
We're getting quite a response. Now, it has to be said, to be specific, that the 2120 Chess Studios, which we're having the event, is not where the album was recorded, because that is no longer there.
Yeah, that's the Chess Termar studio.
Right. It was basically around the corner, right, Michael?
Yeah, it's where McCormick Place is now, on the west side of the expressway.
So, but one thing I can tell you, in this studio, in the back where musicians would come up and load their gear, which is a very steep stairway, it's the same one that's been there since the 60s. So
wow.
You kind of grab the handrail and get some mojo from it, because all those guys touch that handrail. I mean, Willie Dixon, Otis Spann, Chuck Berry, you name it.
Buddy Guy, everyone, yeah.
And in the gallery and in the museum, Mr. Lowenthal already has a picture there, and he didn't even know it, of Chuck Berry.
Yeah, that's right. Bob, it'd be fun to do a walkthrough video to send to Andrew and Simon and Brad, so that they can see the inside of chess as we walk through it. That'd be great.
That would be amazing.
Oh.
That would be so good.
I think we could do that.
Oh yeah.
Can you do like a Facebook Live or some sort of thing like that?
I have a feeling there's going to be.
We can go live on the channel.
Jeff's got a couple friends, photographers that are coming, and I think I've talked Jeff into bringing his camera too.
I'm going to be too busy signing books, but I'll.
And by the way, books are very limited, because we air shipped in books for this event. So the book actually comes out in America November 28th. In England, it comes out, I believe, January, because of distribution. So, but everybody's selling. I mean, I got to say, Amazon, unfortunately, Target, Walmart, Schiffer Publishing by itself. And I got to say that I'm very humbled to be even just a small part of it, because Peter Green and Danny Kerwin have been my idols since 1968, 69. Yeah. Since I stopped listening to the classical music and went into rock.
Good man.
Well, I was very lucky to see the book. I got together with Bob for dinner a while ago, and it's extraordinary. You guys are absolutely going to just go crazy when you see this. I didn't even know what to expect. I was thinking, well, how good could it be, you know? And
what do you mean? How good could it be?
well, I mean, you know, because I have this record here, and look at all the photos. You know, they're the same size in the book, right?
Yeah.
No.
That's called the concept of uniformity. That's why they're all that.
But when you open up the book, I mean, you finally see these things the way you should have seen them 50 years ago, and it's extraordinary. Instead of me looking like back then when I, you know,
you can actually see them.
Right.
You can actually see the pictures.
I would use a magnifying glass and zoom in and try and see what they're playing and things like that. It's really an amazing book. It's so well done.
Thank you, Curtis. Brad, did you ever notice how Danny Kerwin holds his guitar like a classical guitarist?
Yes.
He holds it way up.
Yeah, and I've always been amazed. I mean, the height they used to play the Les Pauls, like I admire that, because I have trouble playing it up that high. To play that stuff that they're doing with those bends, I need to have it a little bit more like I'm sitting down and playing on the bed or something. I need it at that height. The way they played, it just Danny Kerwin, watching his left hand, and Peter Green as well. I'm still mesmerised by the pictures, by the footage, everything I've ever seen and heard. And we're doing Mr. Wonderful today. Later today, we're ranking the tracks. I'll give that a little bit of a plug while everyone's here. And
can't wait for that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was just really, really wonderful to listen to that album again, and the playing on it. Such, and the pictures that you guys have presented, it paints a picture for what you're listening to. I think it's very important to have pictuse and footage and what everything that's available. Jeff, I've got a question for you. So with the camera, you said that you had to pick one that didn't have a click so that you couldn't hear it in the recordings. But I'm going to throw a spanner in the works. Maybe you should have used one with a click, so that basically you're part of that recording, so that you're hearing the clicks.
To give you a little secret, obviously, if when they're playing active music, I can shoot on the beat and you wouldn't hear it. Yeah. But just my whole philosophy of photographing recording sessions is you want to remain in the background and not be part of the show. And I think I did achieve that with this particular session, because the only times you have a musician looking at me is when Jeremy asked me to take his picture with JT. So there are 2 or 3 pictures. I think one is in the book where they're turned and smiling and he had his arm around and stuff like that. In fact, the one that people think of as iconic of Peter, I shot with it.
Yeah, the one we sent Simon and Andrew.
Right, was shot with a 21 millimeter, which is a very wide lens, and I have to be pretty close to do it, but he was occupied in listening to a playback, so I could softly go up and do my picture and then back off and go do somebody else, and the Leicas allowed me to do that. So
now, Brad,
and by the way, I sold them to a Japanese company, as you mentioned, Curtis. There was a Japanese camera company that came to all the photo shows when they used to have photo shows, and all they did was buy Leica equipment. They didn't sell it, and they brought it back to Japan for collectors who paid fantastic prices for it. So that's where my 2 Leicas are now.
So Brad, I want you to listen to the album. I want you to listen to the second cut, which is Ooh Baby, which is like Long Gray Mare.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff, you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
and you can hear Peter say, "Can we turn the lights out?" He's talking to Mike Vernon. Now, Jeff, in the meantime, is in the lockbox between the studio and the control room, so he doesn't hear any of this. So Mike Vernon says, "I think he's coming out more photos," and Peter says, "Can he wait?" By the way, Peter lost that battle. So Jeff is on the record.
but okay, the addendum I put on that story is you'll see some of the pictures. The studio is much darker than in other pictures. So they apparently managed to turn some of the lights down. So we compromised, because
That's one thing
without
that
light,
Mike,
there are no
yeah,
pictures.
right. And that's one
Generally.
thing Mike Vernon said, that Peter Green, when he saw the studio, kind of panicked because he was used to playing in, small studios. And at that time, the studio that they were in could house a small orchestra.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Terramar studio was much larger than 2120. 2120 is quite a compact room.
Yeah.
And I forgot to ask Marshall this, but if they were operating both rooms at the same time, because 2120 certainly has been there all this time, and perhaps the second studio was to take overflow because they were making so many records. They probably needed. The 2120 is just one room. Well, actually, there's a smaller room there that I think that's the room that they have the
Willie Dixon stuff in here,
and the archives back there. But yeah, the Terramar studio is much bigger, and you can see from Jeff's photographs that there's quite a lot of space in there.
Yeah,
right.
I presume they have to. That's recording quite big bands, though, weren't they? If you have horn sections and
yeah.
Well, I photographed Woody Herman's orchestra was there on one date that I shot, and for a Ramsey Lewis date they had a string section.
Yeah.
And I think Michael may be interested in this. One of the things I used to talk to Stu about recording techniques. I know Stu from before he was with Stu Black, the engineer, who was the engineer for the Blues Jam at Chess Session. He used to be a partner in a studio called Hall Recording with a man named Bill Hall, and they were doing all kinds of unique things. They had plans to develop the first feedback controlled speakers that would, correct errors by feeding back to the amp and so forth. And he told me one day they had done this, they were doing it at the time, the string section, and he was so proud that they did it all with dynamic mics rather than capacitor mics, and he was very proud of that. And so they had techniques that probably other studios would poo-poo that kind of technique, and go for the latest mics and so forth.
Interestingly, I'm seeing some engineers going back into dynamic microphones instead of condenser microphones to make their overall recordings a little less harsh, perhaps, or not too
maybe
much.
Stu had the right idea.
Condenser microphones, if used improperly, can be actually quite harsh and a little too bright. Yes. But there's a couple of guys that I know that use Sennheiser 421s for overheads, and those are the utilities dynamic microphone, and they sound great. But it's it's a softer, gentler approach to it.
One thing that Mike said on the album too, when the album was originally released, it was released kind of after I think right around Then Play On. So a lot of the Fleetwood Mac fans at that time didn't really buy it. But in the last 10 to 15 years, because of compact disc and stuff, he says it's been selling really well. Yeah. And also, I think Brad would be interested in this. He said almost every song was the first take.
Yes,
No overdubs.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. There's something. I was having this discussion with someone a bit younger yesterday or the day before. About music these days and that. But there was something quite magic in those back in these late 60s, 70s period, where a lot of music was recorded 1 or 2 takes, and that was what you're hearing on the recording, a lot live, where the musicians needed to just nail what they wanted to get down properly from the word go.
Right.
There was no going back and fixing things. Just an amazing time.
No pitch control.
And it's amazing. You can hear in some of the recordings, and say even Mr. Wonderful listening to that again yesterday and this week, where there's a slight dissonance in some of the instruments and not completely tuned. together. Like, but it's magic. It's sort of, it works really well if you know what I mean. I can't really explain that properly, but you can hear that maybe the guitars are slightly off to each other, or there's an instrument that's slightly off, but that's the magic right there. It's
right.
like I was saying to Jeff, the click of his camera might have been magic in that recording. It's the same thing as when you listen to like Led Zeppelin's The Ocean, and that right at the end you're hearing a phone ringing. I don't know, Alan Garber's in the chat. He might be able to.
You can also hear Bonham's bass drum squeak.
In Sense of Been Loving You. But the thing is, like that phone ringing at that particular time, every time I hear that when the song's playing, I hear it and I look to see if the phone's ringing, but it's not. I don't know. It's just, So, Jeff, your clicks of the camera would have been like, oh, what's that?
Right. And that the thing you're talking about has a very old history going back to 26 or 27. Louis Armstrong made some Hot 5 and Hot 7 records, and I can't remember the title, but on one title you can hear a studio door slam. And they've left it in, of course. They had no way to take it out, and it's in every reissue.
Well, we're talking about recordings. I mean, Michael, I think with digital technology, there's pros, obviously, but I think you can tell when somebody's never been in the room together and they've put together a song.
You can. There's a whole cohesiveness that happens when 3, 4, or 5 guys are in the room together and they click, and you feel it through the speakers. You just know that you've got something really happening.
And don't you think too, when like, for instance, we can talk about overproduced albums, but if you're doing a song, and that's one thing I'd read about George Martin and Jeff Emmerich, is that if you're doing 20 takes of a song, you lose some of the excitement.
I try never to go beyond 3.
Right. I think that's really key, and I think that's the other thing. Back when I was younger and listened to the album, when I was in high school, that was the first time you could actually listen to an album and imagine yourself with Jeff's pictures in the studio, because you heard the talk back. You heard the producer talking to the musicians. You heard the musicians, yelling at each other. You heard all that.
Yeah.
And that was, at the time, the closest that I'd ever get to a studio, even though I've been in many studios since. But I can't think of any other record in that era that gave the listener that kind of perspective.
And I know on some of the Fleetwood Mac reissues that Mike's been involved in, he's allowed the talkbacks to be part of the tracks. There's one, I forget which track it is now, but they do a count off. Mike sort of comes through the talkback and saying it's take something or other, and Peter counts it off and goes, "Good luck."
Or hear him tell Mick Fleetwood, he's like, "Well, what if I come in wrong?" He goes, "You won't." He goes, "What if I do?" He goes, "I'll fucking brain you."
But to Brad's point, back in the day, and certainly when I started recording, you had very limited budgets. And you had to be right on the money. You had to be good. You had to know what you were doing. You were in the analog world, so you had limited storage ability. You had to get solos right, and maybe you could get a second one. You'd be lucky if you were. But with all the blues recordings that I do and have done, I've tended to go for that approach to get the performance in the studio with a group of guys. And then, we'll do solo overdub or two, and we'll do vocals, and we'll do perhaps keyboards or horns or whatever, and background vocals. But for the most part, the basis of the recordings are performance recordings. And that's what the great recordings of the 60s and the 50s and 60s and before that really were. And we actually heard a group of musicians who just locked and got it right. And those are such a pleasure to listen to.
I agree.
And for Bob's edification, this is recorded. This is Jimmy Fast Fingers Dawkins recorded live at Alice's restaurant and this is the date on it.
Wow.
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 And I was recording that for Bob Kester at Delmark Records, and he loved the first set. He loved the sound, just 2 condenser mics. And for the second set, the band got drunk and couldn't play at all, so the recording's never been issued.
I
So
think
I
you
get to keep
recorded
it.
that. Jeff, didn't you record that on the Ampex that I have?
No, I recorded it on a Sony 770. The Ampex
okay.
I bought for you.
I have a mono 2 reel-to-reel Ampex recorder that Jeff gave me.
A 601. That'll bring back memories, right?
I'm scared to plug it in.
Hey, if I could jump in, I wanted to say 2 things. You know, I have this record that I had since,
That's
way back
familiar.
when.
I see that. Yeah.
And we had dinner, I don't know, maybe a couple months ago with Jeff and Bob, or maybe it was longer. And I brought the record and I asked Jeff if he would sign it for me on the back, if you can see here. And he did. And he said,
That's my signature. Yes.
Yeah, these sloppy signatures. You got to work on that.
And Jeff said, that you're the first person who's ever asked me to sign one of these records. And I'm really honored that he did this, because, I said, well, of course, you were the photographer and I've had this forever and I get to meet you and we're having dinner. And this is just, this is wonderful that you would do this and even sign it. So I thought I really cherish this. So I thank you very much for this.
You're very welcome.
Brad, have you ever seen the video? I'm sorry, go ahead, Simon.
There's somebody in the chat who wants you to sign the book, Jeff, as well. Somebody called Enchu Faddux said, Mr. Jeff Lowenthal, any chance I can have your book signed by you? Thanks. So there's a request for a second signature.
Where are these people located? They could be anywhere in the world, right?
Yes, I know. Yes,
That's why we're sending. That's why we're sending Andrew the 5x7s of Willie and Peter in lieu of signing a book, unless you can get to Chicago in October.
Yeah. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching on replay, please subscribe to us, because the Rock Professor and I, Brad and Bob and Jeff, we'll get together. We'll hatch a plan where you can win these signed prints. You want to make sure that you're sticking here with us to find out how you can win them.
I want to win one.
Brad, have you ever seen the video that somebody in France actually took in '67 of Peter Green and Danny Kerwin rehearsing One Sunny Day?
I have seen it. Yes.
I was playing that for Walter Trout when I interviewed him. And when Danny, it's not plugged in, and Danny Kerwin, and forgive me because I don't know the note, but he's second from the top fret, and he does a vibrato, and you can hear it. And Walter he's like, you can't do that.
Can I play that? Can I play that segment while we're here? Can we play that?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
He's playing a Watkins too.
Just hold on, guys.
And you think
I actually think it's in the UK. It's actually filmed in Danny's mother's house or flat, I think. It's actually by a French documentary team. But if you give me a second, if we can play that, I'll be grateful while you're talking about it.
And you think about it, One Sunny Day, which was, recorded by Fleetwood Mac later, he played that in Boiler House. So he wrote that when he was about 15.
Wow.
Because when he came to the States, he had just turned 18. And Peter actually thought he was responsible for Danny's demise, which is also really sad. And I'm sure when you saw him, Brad, it was not a warm, fuzzy feeling.
2010, I saw Peter Green at the Prince in St Kilda in Melbourne. But he seemed in good spirits and he was playing well. So yeah.
My wife and I flew out to California to see him when Splinter Group started. In my opinion, Splinter Group they kind of did not do Peter right. He shouldn't have been on the road, but Mick Fleetwood introduced him in years. And when he was playing the encore, I looked at my wife and she had a tear in her eye because he was playing a turquoise Strat and he had the tone that he used to have. Just for a second.
I remember that.
Yeah, this is amazing. So Danny's probably 16 right there.
Comme les Beatles et les Rolling Stones à leur début, Danny Kerwin habite la banlieue ouvrière d'une grande ville anglaise. Lui aussi joue de la guitare et va répéter avec des amis, le groupe Fleetwood Mac.
Hey, all right, I better fix it in. Well, no, you've got thanks, right? Don't eat that, it's poison. Don't part. Do another one. Go on. The one with the... Help me, baby. Help me take my blues away. Help me, baby. Help me take my blues away. Wake up one morning and feel good one sunny day. Times I wonder why it is a lonesome day. Times I wonder why it is a lonesome day. I see you walking away. So it changes. And all I want from you is more than I can do. There's one thing that I know, I'll never let you go.
It's fantastic.
17 years old.
At that time, he was probably 16. Because I have a box set of British blues, and there's 3 or 4 tracks from Boiler House. So, including Something Inside of Me. So he wrote those songs when he was in Boiler House, when he was 15 or 16 years old, which is just amazing to me. I don't know why. I mean, there's obviously reasons why, but to me, Danny Kerwin could have been a teenage heartthrob. I mean, he had a gorgeous voice. I mean, you listen to Dragonfly or some of the songs he did on Future Games or Bare Trees. To me, Danny Kerwin is responsible for getting Fleetwood Mac into pop music. Not Stevie, not Lindsay, although I love Lindsay. And I'm sure people are going to pick up a book thinking it's about Stevie Nicks. They'll be grossly disappointed. But Danny Kerwin got them into pop. I mean, if you listen to like Killing House, aside from the things that Jeremy Spencer was doing in the 50s, I mean, Jeweled Eye Judy, Tell Me All the Things You Do, Station Man, which if you saw the tribute concert to Peter Green, it blew me away that Pete Townsend admitted that he ripped off Danny Kerwin for one of the biggest songs that Who ever had. Which is kind of a double-edged sword that he's playing a Danny Kerwin song at a Peter Green tribute concert.
Hey guys, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave you, and this has been a pleasure.
Thanks, Michael.
Pleasure's been all ours.
Thanks, Michael.
Always good to see you, Andy and Simon, and nice to meet you, Brad.
Yeah.
Look, great to meet you too, Michael. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, we'll see you guys soon.
Great to
Thank
see you,
you.
Michael.
Take care, Michael. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Curtis,
Yeah.
I think you need to talk to Brad about some guitar stuff.
I'll
Before we
talk
do that,
guitars
I've
all
got a
day, every
question
day.
in the chat,
Yeah.
guys. Can I ask a question in the chat? Professor Gill's Guitar Gear Galaxy, or Chris Gill, as he's better known as, says, "Do you know which model of Watkins? Was it a Dominator, Westminster, something
Rapier.
else? It's a Rapier, is it?
Yes.
There we are. There we are. Chris, it's a Rapier. Thank you very much.
So,
Yeah.
Curtis, you played a bunch of different 59 Les Pauls. And
Right.
they all, I mean, I don't know if you've had the opportunity, Brad, but Curtis said, they all sound different.
Well, yeah, to me, every single one sounds different. Just like every guitar I've ever had, I had a bunch of Flying V's. I've had many different models of Gibsons, and obviously through working at the vintage guitar store and playing for years and years and trading and selling and guitars. You know, because I had a '59 Sunroof Les Paul, and it was okay sounding. It was all right. And then I played, and I loved it. You know, had some great sounds to it. But then everyone I would pick up different. I had a lot of friends who were in bands who were playing in the Chicago circuit, and they had 1959, 1960 Les Paul Sunburst, and you could name some of them. I would pick them up and you would play it through an amp, and wow, listen to that sound. They all have it. They all have a unique sound, unique timbre, and they're not. People think that everyone sounds the same, and they really don't. They're all completely different. And I played a bunch of them, and that's why the sound of I know we always say the sound comes from Peter, and it's true because he could make any guitar. He can pick up any guitar; it's going to sound like him, pretty much like anybody. You know, if Clapton picks up a guitar, he's going to sound like Eric Clapton. If it's a Strat, if it's a Sunburst, but there are certain Sunbursts you will hear a sound. You can hear them on a record, and you just say, "Whoa, listen to that! It's amazing, amazing sound." And they're just so unique. So I don't know what you think about that, Brad. Have you played? What do you think about different?
I've been in the presence of a '58 Les Paul.
Okay.
I didn't plug it in, unfortunately, but I've played a 1960 Les Paul burst, and that thing was incredible, an incredible sounding guitar. But I do agree that every single one of them have got their own personality. Even with modern guitars, I find that if it doesn't matter, you pick up a guitar and it has to resonate with you as well. That tone is something you're going to have to find that connection with the instrument. I can pick up, because I'm a Les Paul guy, I can pick up 10 Les Pauls and one might sound good to me, and then the rest of them, they just don't connect with me. They still sound great like a Les Paul, but they all sound a bit different.
But don't you think, Brad and Curtis, don't you think, I mean, like when you played Greenie, Curtis, you didn't plug it in, but you could tell because of the wood and
you can hear it acoustically.
Right.
Yeah. I've always had guitars you can strum them and you hear it. It's the exact same. It's just not amplified. They vibrate differently. Every piece of wood is different.
That's what's amazing. I'm sure you've seen the video, Brad, and I know Andrew and Simon have, of when Kerwin and Green are playing Like It This Way, and Kerwin breaks and doesn't miss a beat.
Yes, I've seen that.
Yeah, right.
I've seen that. I have to agree too. Like a guitar that's not plugged in, you can tell whether it's got good resonance or not by just strumming it, playing a few chords. You can actually hear the timbre of the guitar. You can really feel it through your body as well. Like when you're sitting against and the guitar's resting against you, you can really feel the resonance then. I dead set, I reckon there's guitars are picked up and they feel very dead. There's not a lot of resonance against your chest. And then there's some you play and you're feeling there's vibration throughout your body. Not plugged in, I'm talking about.
Right.
They're the ones that howl. They howl when you plug them into a Marshall or a loud amp. They just howl. They just sound amazing.
Yeah, every guitar has a different unique resonance frequency. We did a lot of work, research on that when I worked at Hamer for years. And because every guitar, you can find some dead spot somewhere, because that's the way the guitar vibrates. It has its own unique frequency. And so when you're making guitars, you can decide all sorts of different ideas with thickness, weight, length of the headstock, where the neck joins, how deep the truss rod is, all these different things to alter and move the if there's any dead spot, because you don't want where that frequency is, you'll play it and it'll go into a harmonic. Even acoustically, you can hear that. So we used to do a lot of work with that to really try and eliminate that. And when we would do a batch of guitars, whatever model we were doing, say we would run a batch of 30 guitars, they would all come through me. Everything went through me in the setup department. And I would play this one, and every one, you test it out after I did all the work on it. and then you would hit one and go, oh, listen to this one. Oh, this is the one I'd like to buy, and that was always very frustrating to me because I used to think, oh, I should buy this one. I'd like to buy this one, but I could have done that for 20 years on so many models. But
and you only had one Porsche.
Well, yeah, that's the famous story. Yeah,
we have to tell that story for all the people who haven't been privileged to hear that story, ladies and gentlemen, either live or on replay.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I had that's what I eventually did with my. Back then, we bought and sold guitars all the time. You didn't think back then, oh, if I sold this Les Paul, if I sold this old Strat, they're only worth $500, $1,000, $2,000. You don't think, well, maybe in 30 years it'll be worth $500,000. You didn't think that, right? So at one point, I really loved this. I had a friend who was a dealer and sold Porsches, and we went for a ride once. I think me and Joel Danzig, a couple of people, we rode in the car. And
Joel was Paul Hamer's partner, by the way.
Yeah, and it was so much fun. And I had my Les Paul for a number of years. I had it since I was 17, my Sunburst. But anyway, so eventually I said, well, I'd really love to get this car. This would be fun to, have a nice Porsche, as a kid, kind of like an idiot. But anyway, and this guy who had the car, he knew instruments and he played, but not very well, So I said, hey, would you be interested in a trade? And I'll trade my Sunburst for your.
Brad's gonna start crying
for your Porsche. And so we did the deal, and that was great. And then I drove that car. It was like a race car. It was unbelievable. So
one thing I got to interrupt. Curtis has something in common with Marshall Chess, and he doesn't even know it, because when we interviewed Marshall Chess, one of the first things he did after he got his first paycheck is he bought a Porsche.
Oh, really?
And he took Ryan Jones from Chess Studios back to the hotel, and it was a Porsche convertible, basically when they were a cousin to the Volkswagen Beetle.
Uh-huh.
And people were yelling at the car, homo, gays, because, Ryan Jones at the time had really long hair, and, that's what they said in the 60s.
Yep. Yeah, but the way I was looked at, I had these guitars. You wouldn't think that they'd be worth that. I had one of the first Strats, I think I told on the last show, early 1954 was one of the first 6 ever made, and traded that for a 56 Les Paul conversion. So, you just sort of did those deals all the time. You never thought, gee, what would that be worth now? But that's the way it went. When I had Michael Schenker's guitar, when he kind of went crazy and left the band there, and I owned that for a while.
Can I just throw this in, Curtis? So, on face value now, if we reflect upon it, that 58 Les Paul's worth $1 million minimum.
Well, they're all over the place. I see them for $350,000.
Oh, really?
I've seen them for $500,000. I've seen them for different prices. In fact, I know of one that went at an auction down in Texas, like about 6 months or a year ago. A really incredible sounding one with a beautiful maple top, but it was, I think it only went for $175,000. But because the neck, the headstock had been broken off and redone, so things go up and down, and it's also who knows about it and when.
Okay.
Like there are things that can come up at auction, and actually that Les Paul was sold at a Mecum car auction. And one of the car owners put the Les Paul in too. So here few people knew by word of mouth, and they bid it. Whereas if it was on some other auction or something else, it might have gone for 3-4 times that. So you get lucky sometimes. But they're, they should be all $500,000 to $1 million, depending on what it is. I mean, I'm sure that Strat, that 54 Strat I have, to me, that's the ultimate Strat. And that'd be worth $1 million. But easy come, easy go. There you go. So.
What would that Porsche be worth today, though, as a comparison?
Not that much.
No,
not that much. Yeah, exactly.
But Curtis, the fun that you've had in that Porsche,
there we go.
Let's say you can't put a dollar value on that.
Oh.
So Brad, you've actually met Curtis before. Because Curtis and I have a lot of skeletons.
I can imagine.
Hey, you know, one thing I wanted to say to Mike, but he jumped off there. I wanted to say, you know, you guys were talking about one of those Fleetwood Mac sessions that were almost all first takes. That back then, that's what people would do, and you want it to be fresh. And the more you do the takes, you kind of lose it. I don't know how you feel about that, Brad, but I always did. I did a session with Mike Freeman years ago with this band, and the first guitar solo part, you know, I played a Strat, and I thought it was great. It sounded perfect. I loved it. And then up in the control room, I think it was Joel was on there with Mike, and they said, try it with one of these other guitars, and then try it with this one, and try it with one of the V's, and then try it. And by the third or fourth time, I lost interest, and it didn't feel the same because I didn't have the same energy. If you come into a first take right away, you're ready to go. You put all your energy and your feeling into it. And if you do that 3, 4, 5 times, to me, I totally lose it and I'm not interested. I don't know how you feel, Brad, about that. But
I've been, you know, quite fortunate to have recorded in some of the greatest studios here in Melbourne and Sydney, and then also recorded at home a lot with my last EP I've done. But I do find, I have to agree, you've got to try and stick with that initial energy when you're recording. I've had some instances where, for example, you know, they go, just get your sound, and I'd be playing I'd do a guitar solo and I'd play it and I go, did you record that? They go, no, we're just getting the sound. I'm like, that's the one though. You should have recorded that one.
Right. Always run tape because you never know.
Yeah. And I've tried
To your point too, on Fleetwood Mac in Chicago, one thing that Mike Vernon pointed out, the last 2 tracks, which you guys should listen to, Sugar Mama and Homework, he said by then, because they did 18 songs in one day, and he said Peter was getting a little frustrated because he was holding back so much. So by the time they got to, you know, they had 20 minutes left, so Peter's like, I'm letting loose. And if you listen to Sugar Mama, especially you, Brad, the vibrato that he does there, it's almost painful. And then to your point about first takes, Homework, which is a cover song, you just hear Mike Vernon say, go, and they start.
Yeah. And that, like, honestly, I think that a lot of the magic is in that, though, those first couple of takes. And, you know, because I've been in a band I was in previously that meticulously go over guitar solo to the point where you were playing, like, just trying to perfect a note rather than the feel. And I really didn't enjoy that whole process at all. It was hours in the studio, locked away, recording guitar solos, and do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. I'm like, man, I'm losing this now. By the time you get to the 3rd or 4th take, you've pretty much, your first take was your best one, second one probably better, and then they start to go downhill from there. And eventually it just sounds like a machine, not you're trying to.
And Brad, you just described what Ainsley Dunbar talks about in the book, because obviously he's played with some of the premier guitarists ever, right? And he said that's exactly what got him sick to death of playing with people, is because it was the same bloody thing every night, no matter what. They'd go home, practice the solo, so it was the same. And like Mike Vernon said, you know, I don't want to hear the record. I want to see what you can do live.
Yeah.
Right.
I have to say, like, I love a bit of a mixture when it comes to seeing a live band or playing with a band. If there's another guitarist and they're solo, I love hearing them start the solo off maybe the same way, but it goes somewhere different, and they're feeling the moment. You're in the moment with them, and then they come back to, you know, that part of the song. They land where they're meant to land, but in between, it's like it could be anywhere. They could take you on a journey, or they're going to pull it short, or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I can see if you're doing a worked out solo, you know, and it's iconic and people want to hear it. If you're in the studio and you have to get that right, but if you're improvising, boy, it's really good to just go with your first, you know, thoughts. You know, you seem to be the most creative. You know, otherwise it doesn't sound real. That's why I always like improvising.
Before you were talking about people's hands, Brad, one of the things that in all the research that Jeff and I were doing for the book is one of the things Christine McVie said about Peter Green is he had the most beautiful hands she's ever seen. And if you notice too, he had like a 6 or a 7 fret stretch.
Yes.
That's like Hendrix, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Hendrix was, it's the same. But in saying that, like on this channel, we do a lot on Van Halen as well. Like his stretch was amazing, but he didn't have the biggest hands. So it's just some people have got something, when it comes to their joints, and they can spread them out. And it's just amazing, But I love watching.
Curtis might remember this. I mean, I got an Eddie Van Halen story for you. Every year, Hamer would have a Hamer Jam, and people would come in, the Cheap Trick guys, John Entwistle, blah, blah, blah. One year, Eddie Van Halen was there with his girlfriend at the time, Valerie Bertinelli. And I'm a little guy. I'm, 145 pounds or so. And I was trying to get in the bathroom, and I couldn't get in the bathroom. The door wouldn't open. So I just slammed the bathroom, and I heard thug. Eddie Van Halen on his ass. He was a little tipsy. That's when Valerie Bertinelli and him had the same haircut.
Okay, the dolly haircut. Yeah.
Right. So, and I can appreciate a Van Halen or an Alan Holdsworth, as Curtis and I love. But to me, and when I was talking to Buddy Guy too, especially with blues, it should be coming from here. The one thing I'd say that, that I talked to Mike Vernon about is that, Clapton was probably actually more efficient than Peter Green. But Peter Green played from his heart into his fingers to the guitar.
Bob, can you read this comment out, please, from our very, very good friend Tina,
Sure.
who is one of our admins on our Facebook, Peter Green Facebook group. Can you read that out, please?
Sure. You guys should know that Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac song, Although the Sun is Shining, saved me from a knife-wielding maniac in 1979. To make a long story short, I had just put the album on the player, looked up, he was coming straight on at me. I dropped the needle down on the arm just as Danny's voice and the crazy stopped dead in his tracks. I will always credit them for saving my life that day. I will never forget them, and I always will promote their music to new fans. Wow, that's fantastic.
Great. Fantastic.
Great
Tina.
story.
Blimey.
Oh my cow. So Danny Kerwin and Peter Green saved lives.
Hey,
how
Brad, can I ask you, like, your guitar player? So, what's your main instrument? What guitars do you play?
I'm not actually at my house, so I can't show you them. But I've got the two main guitars I use live and recording are 1960 reissues.
Okay.
And one's a flame top, like one's a trans amber color, which I obviously tried to emulate when I'm a huge Gary Moore fan as well. And the Blues Alive VHS came out, and Gary was playing a trans amber colored. It might have even been a burst that just faded. And I tried to emulate that guitar, and it was just by chance. I was on tour. I was playing a Les Paul, and it's a long story, but I'll cut it short. We were touring around in a 22-seater bus, and the brakes went on because a kangaroo jumped across the road, and my guitar was packed up high. He came flying down the front of the bus, landed on the headstock side of the case, and it actually there's my
wow.
Yeah.
Simon's got that's my 1960 reissue. Simon, he's pulling up my Instagram, I think.
Yeah, I know. Just trying to help, or not, as the case may be. I'll try to find the other one.
And as it turned out, I had the where the body of the guitar and the neck sort of dovetail into each other. It kind of lifted the neck a little bit, and I had it repaired, but it never felt the same after I had it repaired, and I was devastated, obviously, and the person I bought it from was a company called Trump's Music in Sydney, and he was a dealer for Gibson, and he got me an endorsement with Gibson at the time. I said, I want, I need to get another guitar because I'm selling this one. I can't deal with the fact that it feels different. It sounds different to me. He goes, I've got the guitar you've always wanted here. He goes, I've picked it up. I've been waiting for you to come back to Sydney to show you. I've been keeping it out the back. So long story short, I said, send me photos. He goes, how about I send it from Sydney to Perth, where you are, which is like quite a long distance to travel, because I know you're going to want this guitar. I said, no, wait till I get back to Sydney. He goes, no, I'm going to send you this guitar. So when I opened the guitar case when it arrived, it was like that. I don't know if you've seen those movies where they open the case and the light shines out of it. It's the one on the left.
Yeah,
there you go.
The one on the left there.
Right.
And it was because I told him I want that Gary Moore look, that Peter Green thing, but with a nice flame. And he picked it out from the warehouse. And my goodness, those two guitars just have personality. There's something about them. And no matter what Les Paul I pick up and play, they just don't feel or sound like those two guitars. I've got a few more Les Pauls, but those two just get worked. Yeah.
Well, I'll make your skin crawl a little bit. When Gary brought the guitar to the Hamer factory in Arlington Heights, Illinois, and Curtis and Paul asked about it, they said, he said, let me get it. It's in the trunk of my car.
No.
Yeah, because he was there to have some other work done on some other guitars that we had made for him. You know, so just kind of strange. That's like, yeah. Oh, well, actually, I have that in the trunk. Do you guys want to see it?
Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable. And the story that his car got rear-ended with Greenie in the back and it broke the headstock. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just to think that guitar, but you got to remember these guys used them as tools. They didn't really see it as an item to sell. Obviously, at some point, Gary needed to sell it for what the reasons we won't go into here, because I don't like to sort of see the demise of an artist. I think Gary deserves the respect that he was such a phenomenal player, and he went back to the blues because that was his
He changed.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was where his heart and soul always was. So, I think Gary did a lot with that Greenie guitar, despite the fact he broke the headstock. He made that guitar sing.
We also had his most successful album playing that guitar.
Exactly. And, to this day, I see Gary as one of the all-time greats. His tribute to Greenie was amazing. The CD and DVD released, or it was VHS. I bought it on VHS at the time.
Me too.
That, to be honest with you, I listened to Peter Green and Fleetwood Mac, but not as much until Gary Moore did that album, and then I went backwards, and I pretty much became a huge Peter Green fan because of Gary Moore. So
what's really interesting about Gary Moore too, guys, I don't know if you guys were aware of this. I certainly wasn't until I started reading the introduction of Shapiro's book biography. There's a new one coming out at the end of the year. But apparently Gary Moore wanted to do a blues album in the early 80s, but got told not to. So that blues album that he did in 88 or 89, 90 or whatever, he wanted to do it 6, 7, 8, 9 years earlier, before blues albums by established kind of rock and roll guys became fashionable.
Yeah.
I think his timing, though, Andrew, was perfect. That 1990 when he released it, I think it was perfect because there was like Stevie Ray Vaughan. There wasn't a lot of guys other than the old school greats that were blues artists, but there was this new surgence of blues interest. There was Kenny Wayne Shepherd coming out. There was all these people that were coming out, and I think the timing was perfect for Gary when he still got the blues. And even on that record, you can tell when he's playing the Greenie guitar.
You sure can.
Yeah, you can really hear it. And but he was a flag flyer for Peter Green more so than you know, a lot of people, and you know, God bless him, and you know,
Well,
I still listen to.
Peter loved him, gave him that
Yeah.
guitar.
I know, and that whole story is amazing, and even to this day, I listen to Gary Moore almost every week. It's just one of my all-time heroes, and
Well, that's one thing I can say about Peter Green and Danny Kerwin both. That, you know, one thing that Peter was very giving. You think about Then Play On, which is my Desert Island disc. He really pushed Danny to the front.
100%.
I mean, a lot of those songs, it's a complete solo record. I mean, Closing My Eyes is 100% Peter Green. Before the Beginning, Oh Well Part 2 is him and his girlfriend. But he really pushed Danny forward, and I don't think Danny Kerwin gets enough credit that he actually deserves.
yeah,
Because he had a great voice, and I told Mike Vernon this, and I'll say this with you and Curtis. He said, I think Danny Kerwin had the best vibrato of anybody, and Mike Vernon said, Paul Kozoff could be a close second.
100%.
Paul Kozoff had a great vibrato. I loved the moment when I first heard All Right Now. I just thought this guy, this is amazing. This is great. He didn't play a lot of notes, but boy, you know, it was like the same thing with Peter Green. Not a whole lot of notes, but boy, he sure got a lot out of them. Put a lot.
And you bring up a good point, Curtis, because one thing that I researched about Peter Green, when he played with Mayo, as you mentioned before, Brad, he thought he played too fast.
Yeah.
He played too many notes. Because when, like, Bruce Thomas would go backstage with him, who's a humongous fan of things, like Michael, he would say, oh, during, whatever song, you played blah, blah, blah. How did you do that? And Peter Green's response was ultimately, I have no idea what you're talking about. I just play what I feel.
Right.
Unbelievable.
And that's one thing when I interviewed Buddy Guy, I said, isn't that what the blues is about? It's playing from your heart, not about this.
Yes, I think the blues is someone that I'm friends with here in Australia who's in a band. I'll leave them nameless because I'm not sure he'd be happy that I'm saying this, but he used to say to me, when you're playing guitar, you need to put, you know, especially on stage, you need to put yourself into that moment, and you want to play not to impress the guitar players at the back of the room doing this, but to impress the girls in the front row and make them want to do things to you. And I'm cleaning this up, by the way, and to make and to make the guys want to be you. So basically, that's, you know, I've always whenever I've gone to do something for a session or play guitar live, I always think that pops in my head. You don't worry about being technical, just play from the heart, make people really feel what you're doing. And I was listening to even like Dire Straits last night, and I was just same thing. I was hearing Mark Knopfler just playing from the heart, and I'm like, this is incredible. But I agree 100% that it's more about the feeling. The blues is more about the feel than the technique.
I mean, that's one thing that I learned from Mike Vernon. Buddy Guy wouldn't let loose on the sessions because he was fighting with Chess Records.
Right.
So he, you know, as Mike Vernon said, he wanted to get Magic Sam too. How cool would it have been for Magic Sam, Buddy Guy, Peter Green, and Danny Kerwin all to be dueling? And one of the things that Chess didn't like about Buddy Guy is his raucous playing. So after he ran out his Chess contract, he released the killer album on Vanguard Records and did exactly what he wanted to do. And you'd appreciate this. When I interviewed him, Brad, he said, I still talk about when I went to England, Simon, and I brought my Strat, and people were laughing at me because they like, you can't play the blues on a Strat. He goes, I still laugh about that to this day.
Yeah.
Yep. Who said that? Yes.
when you know, a good majority of the blues players always resort to a Strat. It's amazing.
You play a Strat too, don't you? You have a Strat?
I've got a few Strats. I've got a I've got an Eric Clapton Strat. I've got a 79 3-bolter, which is considered a bit of a pig when it comes to the Strat family, but it's just such an amazing sounding instrument.
Yeah, I've got my 73 Strat 3-bolt,
Yeah,
and it's just it's absolutely incredible.
yeah, that's amazing that they get such a bad rap, the 7-inch Strats, even though they're increasing in value now.
These were really, really nice.
Yeah.
I didn't want to embarrass you, but Brad, have you ever played a hammer?
Sorry, I missed that.
Did you ever play a hammer guitar?
No, I haven't. I haven't had the privilege. No.
One of my favorites is the my Carina Explorer.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Beautiful. But what I was going to say that that Strat was so great that I bought that. I think I told last time we had an interview. I never even played it. It was in Norm's Rare Guitars in L.A. and I saw it in the window. I said, "Oh my gosh, that's exactly what I want." And I had a buddy of mine go back the next day and buy it for me. And he liked it so much that he was like keeping it for like a month. And I kept saying, "Send me my guitar. Don't make me fly back out there and get it." You know, so
that's my 70s one beside my my mate. These are my two main recording guitars.
Yeah. Okay, so you were a Gibson and Fender guy. So great.
Yeah. There you go.
Did you ever? One thing that Peter Green switched to was orange amps because of the built-in reverb. Have you played orange amp? Have you, Curtis?
I used to own them. I had an 80 watt and a 120 watt that I had a switch in it that would kick out 2 of the power tubes to bring it down to 60 watts. And then I had a couple other things I did to it.
Because going back to when Jeff and I originally met at Jeremy Spencer, I remember, when Paul and I and Jeff were there, one of the things they had to do is go out and find Jeremy Spencer an orange amp because he wouldn't go on stage without one.
Yeah, I loved mine. I had a lot of fun with those, but I had a bunch of Fender amps, and obviously I've got a ton of Marshalls, so I played those too. But
and Mike Vernon said in that session at Fleetwood Mac in Chicago, because I was wondering about the Fender Twins in the studio, and he said the only person that brought his amp was Jeremy.
I've got an orange Rocker 32.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean,
cool.
I thought that was interesting that you go from orange amps because everybody at the day was doing Marshalls, right?
High watts.
Yeah.
I remember Jeff Beck used to play through a Marshall, but behind the Marshall for the PA, it was Mike the Fender Twin. So the Marshalls were there for show. Who I got to say, interviewing Kim Simmons, who's one of the nicest men I've ever met in my life. He's like, I don't own any Jeff Beck records, but he's absolutely the best living guitarist in the world.
How could you not own any Jeff Beck albums? At least Jeff Beck group. You have to have some of those.
Yeah. I mean, I saw Jeff Beck at it's interesting too, and I'll say this to you, Brad. When I interviewed Buddy Guy, he mentions Page, which I thought was weird. He mentions Beck, but he never ever mentioned Eric Clapton.
Wow.
Which I thought was kind of strange.
Yeah, very strange.
Yeah, the Beano album. I mean, Curtis and I are going to have a jam in December, and I know a couple of those songs we'll be doing.
Yeah,
like Little Girl.
Yeah.
But I was really surprised that he didn't mention Eric Clapton. He mentioned Green, and he said, if it wasn't for those guys, those British guys, the blues would have been dead in America. He said, we owe those guys everything.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, one other thing I never got to show in the last interview, so I will before I forget. You guys, we were talking about early albums, and I talked about being a big Beatles fan, and I actually bought Meet the Beatles back then. Saw them on Ed Sullivan. I had my mom drive me to the store so I could buy this. I think she loaned me the money, but so, and you guys, and I told you a story that I had it, and I was a big fan of one of these TV shows, My Favorite Martian. So I brought the album home, and I drew antennas on Paul and a beard because, in the My Favorite Martian show, the guy Ray Walston had these antennas. So that's the way I thought about it. And they said, "Oh, it'd be funny if I'd love to see what that looked like." And it's funny because I still have the album. I have the and here it is where I drew. So
thank you. Somebody just posted in that the orange reverb was outboard, so thank you for that.
So there was, that's what I did with the classic album, but I was a kid, so who knew?
Guys, I'm gonna butt out. I'm gonna go to bed. It's 1 a.m. and I've got to get up in a few hours and do Fleetwood.
And not
Mac's
only is
Mr.
it 1 a.m., not only is it 1 a.m., it's Sunday, right?
Yeah. What day is
Sunday,
this? It's like a week. It's like a week later there, isn't it? You're in
it's
November.
With Andrew, it's a week later.
Okay.
Andrew's a week later than the rest of us. Yes.
Well, it was good seeing you.
Good seeing you again.
Simon.
Yes, fantastic show as ever. I'll see you soon, and I'll see you later, guys. Andrew and Brad.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, take care. Bye.
Great to see you, Simon. Bye.
See you later.
Yeah, I think it's great you guys are doing
Cheers,
the
Rock
Mr.
Professor.
Wonderful
See you later.
album.
And Curtis, I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Yes, I definitely will. I will see you on the 21st.
Right.
Yes.
Actually, tomorrow I'm meeting Curtis and an old friend of ours, guitarist, and Curtis will be getting his book.
Awesome.
I'm not invited to that, but it's okay.
I don't want to drive to pick you up, Jeff.
Can we send an Uber to pick him up, Bob?
I'm having a hard time finding that pink limo that says legendary on the side to pick him up for the event. I wish you guys could all come to the event. Brad, Simon, Andrew.
Yeah,
I would love to.
We'll make sure to. I'm sure Jeff and Paul Natkin will be there, who's a great photographer. So, and I'm sure people would, to Curtis's point, be taking some video if we're allowed. But even if we're not, there's bootlegs.
Listen, we have iPhones. We can do it.
We can. I'm sure we can take a quick snapshot here or there.
Oh, even if we go live,
and bring any albums you want me to sign.
Yes, I have other Fleetwood Mac ones.
But I can sign as Mick Fleetwood if you like.
Jeff, you got to tell the Paul Desmond story.
Paul Desmond, who is the alto saxophonist in the Dave Brubeck Quartet. Two things. A woman came up to him one day and said, "I'm pleased to meet you. How many of you are there in the quartet?" So he wrote a book, and that was the title. And what was the other thing? Occasionally, people would ask him to autograph stuff, and he would, rather than have Paul Desmond, he'd write Chet Baker.
I'm glad he didn't write Miles Davis.
Yeah. So when we're signing books, Jeff's going to sign my name, and I'm going to sign his.
Oh.
Actually, I think I'm going to sign Curtis's name.
There you go.
All right, that's cool.
So I just want to take a bit of a moment, though, guys, if we're going to wrap up the show. So most of us are familiar and aware of this book, first edition that came out by Martin, I think in the early 1990s. And Martin's come out now with a, I'll just present myself here, if that's okay. So that's the copy there. It's a paperback. It's also available on Kindle. It's what they call a...
Here's a review
revised
of it.
and updated edition of his wonderful biography. Martin, if you want to come on, I've asked you a couple of times if you want to come on to the channel and talk about your book and the research and what's happened in the time between the different editions. We'd love to have you on the show if you want to come on, and I'm sure a lot of the guys here that are on the show right now would love to be on that show.
I also want to call out Richard Orlando, who helped us with the book. And if anybody's into Fleetwood Mac or Peter Green, this is a must. It's a 3-volume set. It's not that expensive.
And it's available on digital download too, Bob.
Oh, is it? Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
It's everything that Fleetwood Mac did. I can't can't imagine the research that he did for this. It's fantastic.
And Robert too, if you'd like, if you'd like to come on, we've asked you a couple of times if you want to come on and talk about your 3-volume masterpiece. We'd love to have you on. Love to host you talking about it.
Yeah, he gave us some good stuff for both Martin and Richard gave us stuff for the book, and actually I think Richard might be coming to our event, so that's fantastic.
Wonderful.
That'd be
Pass on
great.
our regards when you see him, please.
We absolutely
We
will. We
will.
actually have people from Marshall Chess's partner. He has a YouTube chess channel, which you guys should look at, Chess Tribute. So he does interviews, things about chess. The man who runs his YouTube channel is in, I should have mentioned this to Simon, he's flying over for our event.
Yeah, I'm glad you prompted me about that because our channel was collaborating with their channel. So we thank you, Bob and Jeff, for passing that on. So we are sharing playlists.
Great.
We're going to get them on for an interview later on, maybe next month. So we appreciate that. And we've just shared a couple of videos that they've uploaded on their channel on our community page a couple of hours ago. So they're doing some great stuff. So thank you again, Bob, for introducing us to them. I just want to talk about one little thing about the orange amps too that's in this biography here. And there's a comment here by Tim from Facebook talking about orange amps because Dinky Dawson rated the orange amps according to Martin in his book, but then goes on to say that Danny and Peter later on were uncertain about them. So it's interesting because obviously Dinky's hearing something as a road manager as opposed to Brad, what the artists themselves are hearing. So how many times have we heard that debate and discussion with sound guys over the years? They hear something that the artist doesn't, and there's often conflict about what gear is going to be used.
Yeah, right.
I have to say that if Richard does come, we'll definitely talk to him. I mean, Jeff can say that Richard was very, very instrumental, as well as Martin. Martin wrote a whole new thing for us in our book. So we truly appreciate both of their input to our book.
And
yes, we do.
We would love to help promote their books on our channel too, guys. So if you want to extend an invitation to them from your own experiences, Jeff and Bob, about that, we would be more than happy to accommodate them and spend some time with them talking about their product.
We certainly will. Certainly will.
Right.
And we can't thank you guys enough. Brad, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm glad you're doing well.
Pleasure.
I'm doing a bit better. Thank you so much.
The pleasure.
Curtis, I'll see you in about 12 hours.
Yes. Thanks so much for doing this show again. This is fantastic, and I really enjoyed it. A lot of fun.
And so did I.
Thank you, Curtis.
And Andrew, I think you've connected with Paul Natkin, haven't you?
Yes.
Okay, because this is his book. It's the only way to fit it in the screen. But
to back up.
That's upside down.
Your very sharp eyes. Good.
Yep.
Anyway, this is a book, 370 pages of pictures of rock stars, and they're excellent pictures. And the book was delayed 2 years due to COVID. And it came out about a month ago, and it's certainly worth a look if you like good photography as I do. And he's a hell of a guy too, very funny. And he traveled with the Rolling Stones as their photographer on a tour, and so you can imagine the kind of pictures he's able to get.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah, there's some great pictures in there, and it's not just rock stars either. I mean, he's got pop singers and all sorts of things. Beastie Boys.
Bob,
he's going to be at the VIP.
Bob,
is he going to be at the VIP? Do you know, Paul?
He's planning to be. Yeah.
Great, fantastic.
Bob, Jeff, and Kurt. So if we don't manage to do a live stream from the event, we would love to if that works out with you guys. If that can't happen, if you guys would like to come back and hang out and spend a couple of hours with us talking about your experiences of the event and sharing them here, Brad and I and the Rock Professor would love to host you and hear some of the insider stories from the event.
Oh, thank you. We'd love to do that. And I would ask you all to, since it's October in Chicago, please, whatever you do, wish for no snow.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
We don't want people out.
And bear in mind that we had some of our worst snowfalls in April, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
You know, like 27 inches, something like that.
Wow.
Actually, that's one of the things that Mike Vernon said that he absolutely despised about the session is time went outside. He goes, it was minus more than I could handle.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Well,
January in Chicago.
We'll have to take a lot of photos, Bob, at the event, and Jeff, so that we can show these guys.
Yes.
If we do show after, we'll sneak a bunch of photos. So even if you can't do any kind of a stream from the event, at least they'll get a good picture of what it was like.
Yeah,
we're
bringing everything down to chess on Tuesday, Jeff and I, and at that time we'll have a lot more information, and I'll partake it onto you, Andrew. We're dropping off 8. There'll be 16 frame photos of Jeff's in the gallery. We have an interview that's both interviews are less than 30 minutes with Marshall Chess and Mike Vernon. So it should be fun. We're going to have videos in some of those small little Sony TVs they have in the gallery playing appropriate Fleetwood Mac videos. So it should be a fun time. Plus, you get to be in a studio that so many people recorded at. I mean, the list is long as my arm. And to everybody's point, Jeff Lowenthal definitely has another book in him. I mean, this guy used to hang out with Lenny Bruce. I mean, my goodness.
Well, what people need to do is they need to make sure, if you're watching on a replay, if you have not already got your pre-orders in for this modern masterpiece, we know that it will be. Get your orders in.
It is,
so that
definitely.
you can give the impetus and the drive that Jeff would want, that he will need.
Can I
for
leave
another
you
book.
before we leave, Andrew? I want to show you one of the best pictures of the book.
Thank you. I'm going to present you, brother.
Ah, there he is.
Oh my gosh!
There's the Leica.
What
you like those pants?
Dude.
What about the pants? Yeah.
Yeah, they're great. I still wear those.
Classic.
Wow.
Isn't that great?
Listen, fashion is a rotating thing, right? And eventually they will come back. Bell bottoms came back.
Yeah,
right?
Many times.
If there's another show, Jeff, can you wear those pants, please?
I only wear them for special occasions, so maybe.
Groovy.
By the way, that was some of these pictures were discussed very intensely, Jeff and I, if they were going to go in the book or not, and I'll leave it at that.
I don't understand what that means, but
and by the way, in the album, everybody listening, there's 100 photos, and of course they're an inch by inch. In the book, there's 160.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of photos that nobody's ever seen.
Unreal.
Wow.
Well, it's definitely a part of musical history, and we have Mr. Lowenthal to thank for that.
Yep.
Well, personally, I just want to extend my personal gratitude to you guys, you know, for sharing your experience in this project with us. You know, just Brad and I have always said this in the Rock Professor. We're just fans, Bob and Jeff. We're just fans getting together, and we're just sharing this this beautiful music that we love, that's motivated and been behind us, as from young boys right through to our lives, and to be part of this with you guys, it's I got to kind of pinch myself, going, wow, I'm hanging out, I'm doing a chat, I'm doing a show with Jeff and Bob and Curtis. You guys are giants, so thank you.
Well, thank
Yes.
you, and thanks to
Well,
Paul
thank
Hamer
you.
for
Pleasure.
thanks
Yeah.
for Paul Hamer for chiming in too. I truly appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you for arranging that, Bob. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to pass on my last words, and then we'll go from Brad, Bob, Curtis, and Jeff, and then we'll wish everyone well. Again, I wish you guys the best in your travels to the event. Be safe, and we hope that you guys have a lot of fun, but don't get into too much trouble.
Well, what good is that?
We'll try not to.
Yeah, well, I'll mirror what Andrew said. And have a wonderful event, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us, and lovely
Nice
to meet
meeting you,
all.
Brad.
Lovely to meet you all, and I'll pass it on to Bob.
Thank you, Brad. Good health to you, sir. And I'm glad you're
Thank
doing
you.
better. I truly think of that. And best to Simon. He's got to get me a Wallace or Gromit autograph. And Andrew, I can't thank you enough. I mean, you've been great. Mike Vernon's listening to your channel. I remember when you only had 700 subscribers.
600.
600.
600.
And
Wow.
I'll pass it to my my good friend for a long, long time, Mr. Meisner.
Yes, thank you. I'll see you tomorrow, Bob. So
Yes, you will.
And this has been a lot of fun. I appreciate this. Anytime, guys. I'm always happy to talk rock history and the things obviously I've done in guitars and all that. And I love your show, what you guys do. And Brad, wonderful meeting you, and hope we have a chance in the future to talk more about guitars and stuff.
Definitely.
And visit. And Jeff, can't wait to see you again. This is really. I wish you guys, you and Bob, just all the success, because this is going to be this is really quite a fantastic work, and you guys have done a great job. So thanks.
Well, thank you for that.
And thank you for the nickname of legendary Lowenfeld, Curtis.
Well, he is legendary. He is. He's the real deal. He's the guy.
Over to you, Jeff.
Okay, and I just wanted to say goodbye to Amy, who is coming up on the text messages, and Greg Norman, is that?
That's correct.
Greg Roberts.
Greg Roberts.
Goodbye, Greg.
Well, we'll see you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We truly appreciate it.